The Day of the Rope by Devon Chapter 16. Ethan sat at the kitchen table located inside the house the group had purchased just outside of Washington in the Virginian suburb of Ashburn. The group had pooled some of the money that had been earned working the list and bought several properties across the country to serve as safe houses. The houses were used as local staging areas for their various ops, but were also fully equipped to sustain them if shit hit the fan. Each property was stocked with several weapons, ammunition, water, and enough food to keep 12 people alive for at least 3 years. The homes also had stealth ham radio antennas installed and high-powered transceivers capable of reaching one another on multiple frequencies. The solar panels were installed on each of the rooftops, and discrete rainwater collection systems were in place at each location. At least one vehicle, fully gassed up and packed with emergency supplies, occupied each garage. Charlie had also installed surveillance systems that allowed the group facing outwards. Charlie had also installed surveillance systems that allowed the group to keep an eye on things remotely. All of the cameras were outdoors and facing outwards. The video streams had just enough encryption to prevent people from snooping around without raising any eyebrows. The group had decided to set up various safe houses shortly after their first meeting with Ethan. After they had told Ethan their plans, he had suggested they begin slowly cashing out their crypto. If it got out that the list was compromised, he had argued, the price of the cryptocurrency used to pay out the list operators would crash. Another consideration was, due to the massive amounts of crypto they had accumulated by taking names off the list, they could potentially trigger a crash if they all cashed out at once. There would also be no telling what would happen to the country or the economy if civil war broke out. Would the dollar crash? Better to prepare for the worst case scenario now while the economy was doing relatively well. They systematically liquidated the majority of their crypto assets and turned the proceeds into gold and property. After purchasing the homes and stocking them up with supplies and weapons, they had begun executing their plans. These new plans, Brian had explained, meant taking things to the next level. The group had to start thinking in terms of starting and winning a war. The outcomes of wars always favored those who were able to inflict the most damage. It was simple math. Not just military targets, but civilian targets as well. By that, he didn't mean the group should just start bombing schools or randomly targeting people, but that the families of enemies and their employees were all fair game. You think when the U.S. does a drone strike to kill one enemy combatant and ends up killing 80 people at a wedding that it's just an unfortunate accident? Or unavoidable collateral damage? Brian had asked the group. Of course not. The truth is, the planet is ruled by different crime families, constantly fighting over power in different parts of the world. Some of the crime families end up with access to high-tech weapons, and they use them. Killing your enemy's entire extended family while they celebrate a wedding sends a message. What message is that? Ethan asked, although he knew the answer. Same message the mob sends when they erase a rival family they can't control. You fuck with us, and we'll end you. And just like with the mob, sometimes that message sparks a war that goes on and on and on for generations. Which is another reason it's a good idea to get the whole family. Nobody is going to try and avenge Uncle Vinny if you wipe out his entire bloodline. Which, speaking of bloodlines, these people are obsessed about their bloodlines. You start threatening their legacy, and that's going to be a powerful psychological weapon. Brian had studied each of them carefully, looking for any hint of weakness or indecision before he continued. These congressmen and senators that we know are dirty, and not just the stereotypical shit, like accepting bribes kind of dirty, but the real treasonous, baby-raping scumbags that have priority. These guys are usually pretty difficult targets. They know about the list, and they have security details and underground tunnels that take them between the different buildings in DC. You might be able to get lucky and pick off a few of them on the street if you knew their schedule, kind of like how they shot Reagan. But you'd probably wind up being just as effective. The opportunities are there, but the risk is high, and it would most likely amount to a suicide mission with no guarantee of success. I think in cases like this, it's easier to look at how they kill each other. Taking their plane down when they fly it back home seems like it would be doable, said Arrow. Very doable, and something we should look into further, Brian agreed. But what I'm suggesting is we don't even focus on them right now. We should begin identifying some high-value collateral damage. Maybe they have an elderly parent stashed away at some home somewhere with zero security. Maybe we can make it look like natural causes. Most of these guys have wives back home who go out in public without security. Accidents happen. Or what if we identify a boarding school where their children go? Very light security, sometimes no security at all. Maybe arrange for a gas leak that takes out several of them at once and still looks like an accident, so that they can't use it to grandstand. They'll use it for sympathy, Charlie said. Of course they will. But this late in the game, even with dead kids, they're only going to get sympathy from people that don't matter anyway. Our side knows that the last thing these people care about is dead kids. We just have to avoid anything that looks like it was intentional, because most of our side doesn't have the stomach for this kind of thing. We need just enough plausible deniability so that they look crazy if they try to blame it on us. But at the same time, when it comes right down to it, they know it was no accident. Perfect way to fuck with them. And send the kind of message we want to send, Brian said. Not only that, but just imagine the resources they would have to shift around once they start to think that their families aren't safe, Arrow said, scratching his beard. Exactly, Brian agreed. You know what's fucked up? Ethan said. You mean, besides all this? Said Arrow. I think I know what you're going to say, but let's hear it, said Brian, a grim smile on his face. Once you make the connection, Ethan said, really, shake all that programming they pumped into us our entire lives. The programming that says that for some inexplicable reason it's okay when the ruling class starts unnecessary wars that kills millions of innocent people in far off places that you'll never even see with your own eyes unless you're the one that's sending them to do the killing, Brian interjected. Ethan nodded at Brian in acknowledgement. Yes, but even those that do the killing under those orders from these people, you might even say, especially the people that do the killing for the ruling class. Nobody calls it immoral. It's just what they do. Wars just happen sometimes, and it's just accepted that several innocents will just die. Most people don't think about it at all. They might see it on TV that 100,000 children were killed, and for some reason it's okay. It's just something unfortunate that can't be helped. Once you're able to really put it together in your head that if they say it's okay when they do it, if they say what they do is justified, then their families are also fair game. They didn't just agree to the rules, they wrote the rules. Time and time again, they have asserted over and over that killing hundreds of thousands of children is perfectly acceptable. This is on them. Trust me, I know. I've seen it, said Brian. We're talking about the children of people that pose no threat to them. They're fair game, simply because they're in the way of some oil pipeline or maybe some opium fields. Or maybe they just want to boost weapons sales. Hell, some of these fucks just want to adjust population numbers and don't care how it's done, just as long as they can turn a profit. Right, said Ethan. And if those are the rules that they have laid out, then logically it follows that killing their children isn't just an act of self-defense. It's probably the most ethical thing you could ever do. Once you take that pill, there's no real coming back, Arrow sighed. This is how they have managed to hold on to power for so long. It's so dark that most people can't comprehend it, and if they do, they are unwilling to accept what must be done. So they just allow themselves to be ruled by these people because the alternative is so fucking... Yeah, I don't lose sleep over killing them. I lose sleep over the people they ordered me to kill in Afghanistan before I woke up and saw who the real problem was. It's like Ethan said, they have brought this on themselves and their families, Brian said. And their employees, Charlie said. Honestly, that's why I jumped ship. I knew if I didn't, I would be fighting for the wrong side. Lots of guys that work for alphabet agencies think they're doing the right thing. And that's sad. Maybe as things heat up, they might rethink where they stand But most of these guys just don't want to see it. It's war. Some people like to excuse it by saying good people die in war, but that's just avoiding the truth. The truth is, these so-called good people have had their chance to wake up and be on the right side of this. And if they don't get it, because they were too busy watching reality TV and playing video games on their phone, or they were fooled by the lies the media was telling them, well, how good are they, really? This is natural selection running its course. Most powerful force in evolution is death. Removing the genes of the people that got us in this mess is just as important as getting rid of the ones that enabled them. There really isn't a difference. They're still part of the problem, Brian said. Let's hope we're the solution and not something worse, Era said. Ethan hated that the enemy had forced them to play by their rules, but they also knew it was necessary. For too long, the strategy of taking the high road had led them to failure. Sometimes, to defeat a monster, you needed to be a bigger monster. They had spent the rest of the week identifying targets. Sometimes Ethan thought about what Charlie had said about some members of the deep state being good people who were just unaware of the true nature of their masters. He had an idea of how he could extend an olive branch. It would be akin to dropping leaflets on a city to warn the inhabitants of a coming bombing raid. If they ignored his warning, it would be on them. This would be his final warning to people standing on the beach, staring at the water. End of chapter 16.